Welcome back, my friends. Jake here. Today we're going to do another question and answer dedicated video once a month on the community tab of my YouTube channel. I'll put out a question prompt such as this one. Down below you can ask me anything about anything, then give a thumbs up to the questions you want me to respond to. I'll try and respond to as many as I can, but the cutoff for this video was 50 thumbs up. And if you want to watch any of my old question and answer videos, I made a playlist. You can find this on the home page for my YouTube channel. So here it is, the most requested question from RYBC. What, in your opinion, is the most effective assistance international citizens can do to help Ukraine? NAFO truck donations, night vision donations, direct campaigns like Brandon's. So I can't really answer this question because it's subjective. It's up to you to decide what cause you want to support the most. People donating to organizations helping refugees, people donating to medical organizations saving lives on the front lines, or if you want to go on the offensive and directly donate to groups fighting the Russians on the front lines. And if you don't know what to do, you've got analysis paralysis. You can't go wrong by donating to United 24. This is the official charitable organization that anyone can donate to. Over the course of the last 500 days, they've collected $420 million. They then allocate it where they think Ukraine needs it the most. But if you want to follow an individual and donate to them, Brandon Mitchell has done fantastic work, first buying generators over the wintertime. Lately, he's been using his donations to buy thermal scopes for Ukrainians fighting on the front lines. Here is a recent video put out by Operator Starsky in collaboration with Artur Rehi, and highlighting the good work that this is the name of the group, NAFO 69th Sniffing Brigade has done. These guys have been buying hundreds of vehicles, fixing them up, and then donating them to Ukrainian forces. So they're doing a lot of good work. This is a lot of time and effort. I believe the main organizer of this group goes by the name of Ragnar Sass. He's Estonian. If you want to donate to Ragnar or the NAFO 69th Sniffing Brigade, they're doing a lot of good work at the moment, purchasing vehicles for Ukrainian units. Something I personally like doing is anytime I encounter a Ukrainian creator of any kind, trying to share stories about what life is like for Ukrainian refugees or people in Ukraine, I try and support them on Patreon. If they've got a Patreon link, signing up and donating $5, $10, $20 a month, the money's getting to Ukraine, it's getting into the hands of Ukrainians. I think Patreon is a good source. So if you stumble across any independent Ukrainian organizations or creators with a Patreon account, this is a good way to send money their way. Next question. Surovikin appears to be in custody, but where the hell is Gerasimov? And this question was asked a couple days ago, but we did get headlines today. Russian army chief makes first post-mutiny appearance amid rumors of dismissal. So Gerasimov was in charge of the entire war, chief of staff of the Russian armed forces. And it looks like Putin has demoted him. He still might be chief of staff of the military or whatever, but he's not in charge of the war anymore. The rumor is that a Russian general by the name of Teplinsky is now in charge of the entire war. And this guy was originally born in Donetsk. So, he's originally Ukrainian, but I don't think it's going to make a difference. I think this war is doomed for the Russians, and they're just rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic. It's all going down, but I don't know. with the way that Russian corruption works, you can't get rid of somebody as long as they've remained loyal to the guy in charge, Putin. Has Gerasimov done anything to betray Putin? Doesn't matter if he's a competent military general or not. And I don't think Gerasimov has betrayed Putin. So Putin doesn't want to punish him. Putin doesn't want to liquidate him, but has he been an effective military commander? No. We're on day 501 of this war. Russia is losing. Next question is from two New Yorkers. Can the Ukrainians use cluster munitions on minefields along with using them on trenches and troop concentrations and equipment? So in my update video from 2 days ago talking about cluster munitions, I might have made a huge mistake. I assumed that they were good at clearing minefields, but people in the comments section and experts are saying otherwise. Here's an article from NPR. Retired Army Lieutenant General Mark Hertling weighs in on the use of cluster munitions in Ukraine. So this is what General Hertling has to say. You know, first of all, what I'd like to say is these are not bombs. These are artillery rounds. They're fired like a normal artillery round from a cannon, and in the case of these rounds, they contain somewhere between 72 and 88 small munitions about the size of a Coke can. And each one of those acts as a grenade. What they are designed to do is come down on the top of vehicles, hard targets. They can't clear minefields, and they aren't very effective at clearing trench lines. So Ryan McBeth, friend of the channel, made his own video talking about cluster munitions. And he also stated these won't be incredibly effective at clearing Russian trench positions as long as Russian soldiers just go in their dugouts once they start dropping. A couple inches of soil is enough to protect you from the blasts of these tiny bomblets. But Ryan argues what the Ukrainians might be planning is to just take the bomblets out and then drop them from drones. Yes, they're still going to fire off some artillery rounds, but more effective will be just taking out the individual submunition and then dropping it from a drone on tanks and vehicles they can spot in the distance. So each one of these bomblets, DPICM, they have a shaped charge and a steel frag case. So these things are actually very effective at damaging and piercing hard objects, equipment, radar installations, soft-top vehicles, and if you can drop it into an armored vehicle like a tank, it's going to do a lot of damage inside the vehicle. So the theory is that they mostly just want the submunitions to drop from drones. I still think they're going to fire a lot of artillery rounds, and they will be effective on Russian trench positions, but we'll know more in 2 weeks when we start seeing pictures and videos on social media of their use. Next question, how do the soldiers on the ground protect themselves from phosphorus bombs? And if you've not seen the videos online of the Russians using white phosphorus in Bakhmut, it's pretty hellish. And I did see videos of the Ukrainians filming themselves when the phosphorus is falling, and they just stay underground. They stay indoors. I'm sure they have gas masks and other ways to protect themselves from chemical attacks, but you kind of just have to take it. If Russia wants to rain down white phosphorus and burn everything, just don't let it touch you and stay indoors or stay underground, but there's not a lot you can do aside from just let it burn off. Next question from Jabato. Hi from Spain. Can you give us an update on how much of the financial reserves are still available for Putin before he starts printing money? I think the ruble evolution indicates they are burning through them pretty fast. Inflation in Russia is also about to accelerate even more. So nobody really knows what the true financial situation of the Russian government is because Russia lies about everything. They're still reporting data to the World Bank and the IMF, the two organizations that give this information. But the World Bank and the IMF is just accepting it, even though obviously Russia is lying about everything. So Russia's budget deficit surpassed their targets already by April. So in the first 4 months of this year, they've already spent more money than they were planning to spend for the entire year, as far as operating monthly deficits. So the financial situation is only going to get worse for Russia as global commodity prices such as oil and coal and natural gas continues to fall and stays depressed. This is a consequence of central banks raising interest rates to get inflation under control, but inflation in Russia is still pretty bad. And if you go on the Bank of Russia's website, this is what the Russians are saying, they claim their international reserves are 582 billion US dollars. This is in US dollars. But I'm pretty confident they're including the 300 billion that was all frozen in Western banks. So Russia is holding currency in banks in Switzerland and the United States and the United Kingdom and Germany. That's all been frozen. So I think Russia is still counting it. But beyond that, we don't really know if this is a real number or not. If you subtract 300, that leaves 282 billion. Russia can probably go for a while, but they're feeling pretty iffy. This money was supposed to last a really long time. Russia's population is aging. The burden on their pension system over the next 10 and 20 years is going to be enormous. I don't think Russia, their bankers anyways, feel like they can prop up their own currency by just continuously buying it. More people want to trade rubles for literally any other currency in the world right now, so the currency is devalued by 65% over the last year. I argue this is never going to get better. It's only going to get worse. Everything in Russia is just going to get worse as long as they continue their occupation of Ukrainian territory. Next question is from Chico. What do you do to keep some level of sanity in the face of such horror? I admire you and your work very much. It does help to balance my own sanity. Your speech is soothing. Thank you so much, Chico. And my number one piece of advice for everyone in life is to find ways to practice gratitude. Nobody's life is perfect. There's a lot in my life I could complain about or be upset about, but overall, I feel like I've led a pretty good life. For those who don't know, I spent 6 years living and working in South Korea. I was an elementary school teacher by the day, teaching 3rd through 6th grade. In the evenings, I would teach other foreign teachers as well as Korean English teachers. Fantastic life, fantastic experience. I just didn't want to be an English teacher the rest of my life. So I moved back to the United States and I joined the Air Force. Spent 6 years serving in the military. Once again, a fantastic experience. I'm incredibly grateful for the opportunities and the experience I got as an officer in the Air Force. I just didn't want to do it forever. And even now, how could I complain about my life? Being a full-time YouTuber living in Las Vegas, 380,000 subscribers, hundreds of thousands of people watch my videos every day. So yes, everything that's going on in Ukraine, I stand with them. I'm going to do everything I can to help the people of Ukraine defeat Russia, but for my own personal life here in the United States, I'm incredibly grateful. And I just try and remind myself of that in small ways every day. And as long as I feel like I am healthy and safe, I feel strong enough to help other people. That's mostly what I want to do with these update videos. So to everyone watching, I thank you. I'm expressing my gratitude. It gives me strength in order to keep going and help other people. Next question, why are banking companies like Citi, Goldman Sachs, etc. buying Russian debt, likely to default? Suspended business still gives Putin revenue. Why do banks get buying debt? So I don't really know what you're talking about. I googled Citi buying Russian debt and couldn't find any stories about this. So there are old stories. So a year ago, the US Treasury finally blocked Russia's debt payments to Western banks. So this is an article from Bloomberg in June of last year. Russia defaults on foreign debt for the first time since 1918. So Russia wants to continue paying their foreign debt, but the United States government is currently blocking this ability. Technically, the debt still exists. Russia claims they're putting money in an account, but the transactions are just being blocked. But Russia does not have access to the international bond markets. Nobody is loaning Russia money. Chinese don't even want to do it. So Russia is living on borrowed time. Their foreign currency reserves, their gold reserves, they're burning through it every month, fighting this war, and eventually it will all be gone. And their only option left to pay their soldiers is to just turn the money printer on. And that is the recipe for hyperinflation. Next question. Hi, Jake. My best regards from Zaporizhia, Ukraine. First of all, let me say a lot of thanks to you for your outstanding job as a YouTuber, highlighting and commenting this brutal war. As we know, there was much talking and negotiation about F-16 fighters to supply Ukraine's Air Force. What do you think the reason of some delay in a matter of increasing Ukrainian abilities to shoot down more Russian aircraft? People are going to talk about this and debate this for years to come. Why the delay? Why wait a year to send Leopard 2 tanks? Why wait a year and a half to send cluster munitions? Why wait 2 years by the time F-16s finally show up over Ukrainian skies? And I do think that Western military analysts, this is not a good answer. I do believe Western military analysts are treating Russia like a frog in boiling water. People don't like this analogy who like animals, but the idea is to incrementally escalate without triggering a catastrophic response from the Russians. Now you might be saying, Jake, this entire war has been catastrophic for Ukraine. What kind of answer is that? Russia is capable of so much more as far as killing people around the world. So if you're not familiar with the Soviet program BRICS, this will give you nightmares. So in 1971 or 1972, the United States shut down their chemical weapons program under President Nixon. And the Soviets said we were lying. And they continued biological experiments on the most dangerous and deadly pathogens in the world all through the 70s and all through the 80s. And the Soviets were telling their scientists, we have to do this in secret because the United States is still doing it. Even though the United States definitely was not bioengineering pathogens and viruses that could wipe out humanity. The Russians still have all this stuff. We don't know what their existing stockpiles are of, antibiotic-resistant strains of plague. So I did read the book The Dead Hands by David E. Hoffman, and it's terrorizing. It's horrifying knowing what the Russians have in their inventory. And if they want to use it, with biological weapons, you can't stop it. As soon as a human being is infected with this pathogen and it spreads by airborne disease, it's just going to go everywhere around the world. Chemical weapons are a little bit different. It'll be contained to wherever they disperse it. Everyone knows about the nuclear threat. So I do think that Western intelligence and Western militaries have this persistent fear of what will happen if Russia collapses. On my YouTube channel, I argue this is inevitable. Putin is the one driving Russia's collapse. But for Western militaries this entire time, they just want Russia to realize this is a lost cause, give up, and go back to their own country. I feel like it's apparent to everyone that Western governments and Western economies are not a threat to Russia. They want to do business with Russia. They're happy throwing their money at Russia for their oil and gas. But Vladimir Putin and the oligarchs are not happy with just being contained in their own borders. They want to be an empire. They want to attack and invade their neighbors. I argue collapse is inevitable. Who is going to get their hands on these vast stockpiles of biological weapons, chemical weapons, and nuclear weapons? We don't know. We don't know, but Putin's not really giving us a good option here. Next question. Sorry, that was a downer. Are cluster munitions used exclusively as anti-infantry ordnance, or do they have other uses in the battlefield? So we kind of already talked about this, but I've seen the interviews talking about the effect of cluster munitions on the forces in Iraq. Cluster munitions being used in Gulf War I in the early 90s, and it has a huge psychological impact on infantry. These popcorn explosions going off all around you, even if you're in a bunker and you're protected, you're not getting a good night's sleep with all these things going off. So I do think Ukrainians are going to get innovative with the bomblets being dropped from drones. They are going to go after soft targets or any kind of military vehicles with them, and we'll see. Once again, we're going to get pictures and videos in the coming weeks. Next question. Hi Jake, love your videos. I wanted to ask what you think of the BRICS alliance, particularly their plan to launch a new shared currency that is said to be an alternative to the US dollar. Do you think it will succeed? No. None of these people trust each other. India doesn't trust China. China doesn't trust Russia. Russia doesn't trust Brazil. Brazil doesn't trust South Africa. Economic coordination and cooperation is great. They can sign free trade agreements and, promote cross-pollination of their economies. But as far as a shared currency, that would require someone to be in charge of the limitations and rules of that currency. And none of these people trust each other to be in charge of the money supply they all depend on. And to prove my point, what are the 10 most traded currencies in the world? And you trade a currency when you trust it. You trust it's not being manipulated. You trust that you can get your money out when you want to get your money out. And these are the most traded currencies in the world. And you'll notice not a lot of members of BRICS are on this list. China comes in at number 8, below the Swiss franc. And these countries, Russia and China, have the most manipulated currencies in the world. Nothing the governments do revolving their monetary policy, in my opinion, is trustworthy to anyone, and in a global economy, people vote with their dollars, they vote with their money. So Yevgeny Prigozhin, when they raided his office and home, they didn't find Chinese renminbi or Russian rubles. They found 100 million US dollars, because the US dollar is still the most trusted currency in the world to do business with. I'm not saying this will be forever, but as far as BRICS, None of those people trust each other. Next question, how about a quick lesson about how one should write call on the phone to their public official that represents their district and encourage them to send more aid to Ukraine, maybe a blank template. So you can Google how to write your representative. There's lots of good step-by-step tutorials about calling your representatives, members of parliament, or writing letters. Hopefully people are doing this. They're taking their own time to support Ukraine by notifying their elected officials. They also support Ukraine, but this could be its own YouTube video. I'll give it some thought. Thanks for the suggestion. Next question is from Christian. What happened to Dmitry Utkin, the founder of Wagner PMC? He was supposedly leading the Wagner forces towards Moscow. Haven't heard anything from him. So Dmitry Utkin is the original founder of the Wagner group. Wagner is his call sign. He was formerly in the Russian military. And the guy's a Nazi. He's covered in Nazi tattoos. Here's a picture of him being given a medal at the Kremlin from Putin. So Russian state media doesn't like to promote or talk about Utkin, and even Prigozhin in the Wagner group doesn't like to talk about Utkin. But Utkin is the military brains of the organization, and I think he's in Africa. I don't think he's in Russia, Ukraine, or Belarus. I think he's managing the gold and diamond mines and the colonial operations of the Wagner group in Africa. Why did Putin not crush the rebellion? Why is Prigozhin still allowed to do whatever he wants? And it's because the Wagner group is still making payments, I think. As long as they continue their operations, harvesting the natural resources of Africa and sending it back to the Kremlin, then Putin's just going to bite his tongue and continue allowing people like Prigozhin and Utkin to do whatever they want. It's pretty messed up. Next question, how did you learn to do what you do? You have a unique talent for understanding and explaining geopolitics, economics, military strategy, and propaganda, while also balancing humanitarian concerns, humor, and hope. Just wondering if this all comes naturally to you, or if you learned about it in your military training. No, I can't give the Air Force credit. Obviously they contributed to my knowledge base and experience, but I'm more or less who I was my whole life. And I have to give credit to my father. My father's just a very good person. He's a small business owner. He's worked hard his entire life. He's honest in all of his business dealings, and he instilled that value in me. My father's not racist or sexist or homophobic. He believes all people should get a fair shot in life. So those are the values that I was taught growing up as a child. Aside from that, I just have to give credit to getting a really good education. I attended public school in a wealthy neighborhood. And growing up as a child, we just did a lot of project-based learning. Every year in every class, I just felt like I was always doing these really interesting and cool projects for book reports or events. And I didn't really understand how valuable my education was growing up until I experienced the Korean education. There's a lot to brag about the Korean education. Their math scores are fantastic. But as an elementary school teacher in South Korea, I got to experience a different system of learning based on testing and rote memorization, not on cooperation and creativity. That is what I felt like I benefited from in the 90s, all this project-based learning in which I was allowed to explore and experiment and just broadly think about stuff. So that's probably why I'm decent at taking in a lot of information and then helping other people understand it. So that's cool that people think that's a skill and I'm good at it. Next question. Random non-war related question. What is your favorite food? Hello from Slovakia. So my favorite food is probably breakfast food here in the United States. I know in other parts of the world they don't really have dedicated breakfast food. In South Korea, breakfast food isn't a thing. Most South Koreans just eat leftovers from yesterday's dinner for their breakfast, but here in the United States, if it's lunch or breakfast, I am getting breakfast food. If it was socially acceptable to have breakfast food when going out with friends at night, probably would do that as well. But beyond that, I do enjoy Asian fusion food, sushi. I'm a carnivore. Anything with barbecue is always pretty good. So this is my favorite foods. Final question. With the weakness of Russia being displayed, do you see any chance of China deciding to reclaim their lost lands? I've talked about this here in the past, but China went through their century of humiliation between about 1850 and 1950. Western colonial powers in Japan carved up Chinese territory. The French, the British, the Germans, the Japanese, and the Russians. The Russians came down from the north, attacking the Qing dynasty, and they stole Chinese land. But after the communists took power, they got back all their territory. All their territory except the territory that the Russians took from them. So I do think with the rise of Chinese nationalists, historically they're overlooking this at the moment, but as soon as Russia shows real weakness, as soon as Russia's central government in Moscow can't even control their own provinces anymore, yes, the Chinese are going to seize on this opportunity. One, this is a matter of national pride, getting back their historical borders from the Qing dynasty. But two, they militarily need access to the Pacific Ocean without sailing through the first island chain. So Japan, Korea, Taiwan, the Philippines, these are all allies of the United States. If the Chinese Navy wants to more effectively project power and influence throughout the Pacific, they need access to the Pacific Ocean without sailing through Japanese, Taiwanese, and Filipino water. China doesn't care about Russia. They're going to stab them in the back at the first opportunity. But Russia does have a lot of nuclear weapons, and Russia's currently in the middle of exhausting itself fighting Ukraine. So China plays the long game. If it takes them 100 years, they're fine with that. They will get back this territory. I think President Xi is a dictator, and he does have military aspirations to attack his neighbors, but that could take a decade or two to play out. We'll know more in the future, and I'll definitely make some update videos as soon as China goes on the warpath, whether it's attacking Taiwan or attacking the Russians in outer Manchuria. That's all for this Q&A. Thank you so much to everyone who left questions and thumbs up other people's questions. These are a lot of fun for me to do, so that's all for this video. Take care. Be safe.